is always a minimally virtual belief, which is why, for example, I find totally consistent. I had recently, 2 years ago, okay, not so recently, a debate with bishops in Vienna, and I asked them a couple of provocative questions. One was, what's your attitude towards, that Turin shroud? Allegedly, the shroud with which Christ was covered with blood stains, which blah, blah. They told me frankly, privately, not publicly there, we pray day and night that it's not the authentic one. Because they told me why, that it would have been terrifying if it were to be proven why. Okay, the first reason they gave is a more pragmatic one. They said, my God, shit, with all this biogenetics, then the question, who is the father, becomes an empirical one. And as one bishop told me, what if we discovered that there was some Arab or Egyptian slave there really doing it? They were terrified. But I think there is a more radical dimension at it. The problem is that Isaac Asimov, I don't like him as a writer, but he put it very nicely once. He said that there are two possibilities. Either there is somebody out there, aliens, God, so that we are not alone, or we are alone. And he said, both options are unbearable for us. No, to really accept a radically atheist position is unimaginable. But to really encounter another is paranoia. So you need a kind of a virtualized position, which shouldn't be too directly realized. Which is why, did you see a movie, again, I don't like the film, but the idea is nice, from '92 with Steve Martin, Leap of Faith, about this kind of a con artist, southern preacher, pulling these tricks, healing crippled, sorry, politically correct, disabled persons and so on. And then, at some point, he himself is surprised by the fact that he does perform a miracle. And it totally shatters, it totally breaks him down. So I think that the first thing to notice is how there is always a minimal tension in us between belief, disbelief. We believe, but our belief is not this direct, brutal, realistic belief. Paul Veyne, the French historian, wrote a wonderful book called Did the Ancient Greeks Believe in Their Myths? Where he proves that, of course, they did not literally, they were not so stupid as to think that if you climb to the top of the Mount Olympus, you will there see, I don't know, Zeus fighting, family fight with Hera or whatever. They did not. But also, he points out very nicely, we shouldn't impute to them our metaphoric notion and claiming that no, for them, I don't know, Zeus was just the personification of a cosmic principle or natural force or whatever. It's a very specific virtuality of belief, which is why we have this automatic attitude that, how should I put it, when you externalize your belief, I claim, you do it usually to get rid of it, in the sense of, it's out there to disengage minimally yourself. Isn't it that we are often surprised when somebody who professes a belief and then you discover, my God, but this guy really believes. I think this old Marx Brothers jokes holds a version of, with Marx Brothers, it looks as if he's an idiot. This man looks and acts as if he believes, but this shouldn't deceive you, he really believes. It's always a shock. There always is a minimal gap. And this gap is crucial, even in our most actual problems. Let's take global warming. What really happens there? Why don't we act? I think that it's too simple to rely just on this leftist paranoia in the sense of, the big companies, multinationals are deceiving us, blah, blah. No, I think, and it's also not that we cannot be certain. We know, but I claim we don't believe it. It's this fetishist split. I know very well, but what do I mean? We know, you cannot deny. I think that the scientific data are convincing enough. But what happens? Let's say you read the report, but then you go out. You see the stars, the sun, flowers, animals. But you cannot believe that this, we are embedded beings, part of this life world. You cannot really believe that this can be shattered. You know, but you cannot believe it. Which is why one, I think, problematic maybe for some of you conclusion from this, which is why I totally disagree with those, especially let's call them California Heideggerians like Hubert Dreyfus and so on, those who claim that in order that the root of ecological problems is our alienation in this attitude of scientific technological manipulation, which presupposes some kind of disembodied abstract subjectivity, and that we should accept how this scientific technological manipulative attitude of technological domination over nature is just a secondary byproduct or alienation of the original embeddedness in our life world. I claim that that embeddedness, far from being a solution, is precisely the problem. The problem in the sense that this is what ultimately prevents us from taking seriously ecological crisis, which is why I think if we are to take it seriously, we should precisely do this fateful step and unlearn or somehow try to, very difficult to do, to step outside this, our most elementary embeddedness in a life world. We should adopt some kind of a virtual abstract existence, which is for me even a kind of freedom. I will return to this later. So let me go on. At what level does this embeddedness, which of course is an ideological complex determined by all those unknown knowns, implicit beliefs, functions? Now we come to the next specification. Let me talk a little bit about, because there we find these unknown knowns, these implicit rules, how social groups work. Okay, of course, every social group from family to I don't know what is usually identified by its normative structure, a set of rules that you have to obey, which identify you as a member of that group. But I claim that things are always, for theoretical reasons that Lacanian psychoanalysis can easily explain, a little bit more complex. We never simply have rules, and then you obey them, you are in, you don't obey them, you make a social mistake, you are out. The problem is that if you obey rules, if you simply radically obey rules, you appear an absolute idiot, you are out. Which is why, incidentally, they are no longer fashionable. All those courses of, learning to behave as a gentleman, as a lady in the old times, were counterproductive. You appeared as an idiot, because to be truly a gentleman, it's not simply to obey the rules of being a gentleman. It's to know in what way to violate those rules. What does this mean? Imagine a social prohibition. I claim that if you are normal, and we are, the first question you ask yourself when somebody tells you, oh, this is prohibited, is, but what does he mean by it? Is it really, literally prohibited? Or is it implicitly, do it, but do it discreetly? Or it is even a call to violate it, especially with sexual prohibitions. You never know where you are, how to put it. No, the greatest, if you take seriously a demand in an erotic exchange, you may appear the greatest idiot. But even more problematic, I think, and interesting is the opposite example. Not something is prohibited, but the meta rule tells you it's secretly a call to do it, but in a certain way. The opposite example of you are allowed, permitted to do something, but you are given a freedom of choice, but on condition that you don't use it. On condition that you do not do what you are permitted. And again, let me give you a couple of examples to make this logic clear. Recently, I spoke with a Japanese friend who told me that in Japan, workers have the right guaranteed, usual, the workers fully employed, to 40 days of holiday every year. However, my friend quickly added, they are expected not to use this right in its full extent. The implicit rule is not to take more than 20 days. So, European idiot as I was, I tell them, okay, but why don't you then simply put it directly? It's 20. He told me, I don't understand anything, I am an idiot. And he was right. Because although this excess may appear nonsensical, that's true communication. Communication means these empty gestures. You know what I mean? Let me give you two other examples, or even three, from daily life that you must know. I don't know if it's with you. In my country, it's this ritual. If I and some close friend of mine, if we are engaged in a competition for some scholarship,